the land of my fathers, the home of the free, the spirit of ages of one century.
Welcome to the book of Proverbs. This book is a collection of moral and ethical teachings, mostly written by King Solomon. And it offers very practical advice on how to live the best life before God, one that reaps his blessings. It's divided into several sections. So, for example, from chapters 1 to 9, it seems to be it's like a series of lectures written by a father to his son, encouraging his son on the importance of living with wisdom and moral integrity, which actually sets the tone for the rest of the book. He encourages the reader to seek wisdom and the fear of the Lord. Chapters 10 to 22 then are the bulk of the book, written by King Solomon, these short sayings which cover quite an array of topics, including living honesty and with integrity in dealing with people, choosing your friends carefully, controlling your tongue, avoiding sexual immorality. There's advice on raising children and family, and the benefits of hard work and diligence, and the humility and the fear of the Lord, and also justice and fairness. Chapters then between 23 and 24 are sayings of the wise, more sayings. And then chapters 25 to 29, these are written by men who actually worked for King Hezekiah and who actually wrote down the Proverbs written by King Solomon. And they offer guidance for kings and rulers, emphasizing the importance of justice, mercy, and good governance. And lastly, we have the final chapters 30 and 31, which include the sayings of two particular prophets, and also who talk about the blessings and the characteristics, the virtues of a noble wife, which is an interesting chapter to finish on. So these are the divisions within the book of Proverbs. And as I've already mentioned, there are many themes that this book looks at, which of course we haven't got time for today, but we'll look at a few on this practical advice on how to live the best life before God. And so that's my first theme, really, is the fear of God, living in the fear of God. And I think this is the greatest message of the book of Proverbs, and you find it at the beginning and you find it at the very end as well, encouraging the reader to live with the fear of God. In chapter 1, verse 7, it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." In other words, if you want to live a real wise life, then it begins with the fear of the Lord, walking with God, fearing God, and obeying his commands. And actually this phrase, the fear of the Lord, is found around 14 times altogether in this book. It's throughout the book. And the reason why the virtuous wife in the closing chapter is so blessed, because she fears the Lord. You know, as it says in Proverbs 31 verse 30, "But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." Her fear of the Lord is what moves her to be productive and diligent in her responsibilities. And so the book of Proverbs begins and ends with extolling its readers, encouraging its readers to walk in the fear of God and the blessings for doing so. And this is how we should structure our lives. It should be our guiding light and our anchor. We find it too in another of the wisdom books, in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 13, which we'll look at later, the fear of God. You know, and I think it's the reason why our communities, our nations, even our churches sometimes are in disarray, because we lack a real fear of God. Because fear of God keeps us away from sin, and it moves us to treat our loved ones with love and respect. It's a true statement that the world we live in would be a much better place if we took the teachings of Proverbs and the fear of God to heart. Isn't it true that people seek knowledge and wisdom in all kinds of places? For example, in chanting, sound baths, crystals, divination, nature, education, employment, and so on. We all look for wisdom and nature, and of course there is some wisdom and knowledge to be found in all of these things. But you know, we are not just physical creatures. We are spiritual creatures too. And we all long to be more fulfilled and to improve our lives in some way. We all have a need for guidance, direction, prosperity, for healing. But you see, what the world has to offer, the wisdom and the knowledge that the world offers, doesn't even come close to the wisdom and knowledge that God provides. It falls far short of the knowledge and wisdom that come from God. And as the book of Proverbs teaches us, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. So don't waste your time looking primarily for wisdom and knowledge in those other things. Like I said, they could be of some use and benefit, but ultimately, real wisdom and knowledge come from God through the fear of God. Don't do those things to the exclusion of fearing God. To despise God and to despise wisdom and knowledge that come from God is foolish. That's what the book of Proverbs says. Now, don't think for a second that walking in the fear of God and walking in His commands is boring. I can tell you from my own experience that's far from the truth. Walking in the fear of God and walking in His ways and His will and His purpose for your life is some of the most exciting way to live. It's so adventurous because you never know where God is going to lead you next. I've seen Him lead me to the most unexpected places which have been such blessings in my life. The minute you surrender your life to God and you say, God, your will, not mine. You show me what you want me to do, where you want me to work, where you want me to live. It gets very exciting indeed. God will lead you into places that you could never have dreamed of. So walking in the fear of God then is the best and most fulfilling and exciting, I would say, way to live. Everything else that the world offers, getting drugs, money, and other interests, they just don't cut it. They're just not enough. If they were, we'd have a lot more happier people in Hollywood. Instead of people, some of them are depressed and discouraged and suffering with anxiety and even committing suicide. You see, money and wealth and fame are not enough. So as Proverbs 4 verse 7 says, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it costs all you have, get understanding. So this book of Proverbs, it describes two contrasting ways of living. Living wisely in the fear of God or living foolishly without God. Wisdom is depicted as precious and a desirable quality, and one that bestows blessing on those who walk in her ways. Foolishness, on the other hand, is portrayed as a reckless and destructive way of living, leading individuals astray into destruction. And as I've said, if we all made a greater effort to live wisely in the fear of God, this world would be a much better place. If we paid greater attention to our life choices, what we do with our time, how we spend our time, how we spend our money, how we use our words, how we use our bodies, there would be less pain and suffering in our own lives. Listen to the book of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. So live in the fear of God. Another theme we find in this book is that a lot of it talks about money and generosity. Probably what is the one subject that people can be most sensitive about? Whether you've got money or you don't have money, it's this subject of money. We all want more of it. We all cling tightly to our bank accounts. And yet the book of Proverbs encourages us to do the opposite. It encourages us to give and be generous. And the tighter the grip you keep on your finances, you'll find the more elusive money will become. You might be surprised, to learn just how many verses are on this subject of money and possessions, generosity and stewardship in this book of Proverbs. Let's have a look at some of these. For example, Proverbs 3 verses 9 and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. And I just want to pause there for a second, because I am honestly shocked by how many Christians do not honor God with their wealth. The book of Malachi in the Old Testament teaches us that we should tithe. We should give 10% of what we earn. Whether you're a farmer like this person here, or you're working a job, or you're claiming benefits, we should honor God with our income, with the first 10%. And then the Bible promises that God will provide for us. He will make sure that we do not lack. And actually, honoring God with the first fruits of your wealth is a real act of faith. And it will actually strengthen your relationship with God, because it will encourage you to be more trusting and dependent on God. And so I want to encourage you to tithe to your church, tithe to missionaries, however God leads you to give it, tithe and be generous. Another example is Proverbs 11 verses 24 and 25. One person gives freely and gains even more. Another withholds unduly but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. A generous person will prosper. Let's remember that. Proverbs 19 verse 17. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Proverbs 22 verse 9. The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. And let's look at one more. Proverbs 28 verse 8. Whoever multiplies his wealth by interest and profit gathers it for him who's generous to the poor. So the book of Proverbs then commends generosity, helping the poor, honoring God with your wealth. And as you give to the poor, you are giving to the Lord. And it's sad that many of us fall for the lie that actually what we should aim for is gaining as much as we can, holding on to material possessions and money and wealth, driving that expensive car, buying expensive clothes, having a big bank account. But this is not what life is about. As I mentioned earlier, you could still have these things and still feel miserable and depressed. This is not where the meaning of life is found. Sure, they are blessings, but they are not the ultimate blessing. And we need to honor God with what we have. Don't fall for the lie, as many do. As Job himself in the Bible once said, naked we come into the world, and naked we will depart. So Proverbs teaches us that if we will honor God with our first fruits, meaning our income, the first portion of our income, He will provide for us abundantly in return. It teaches us that a generous person will prosper and be blessed by God. And it teaches us that God will reward those who are generous to the poor. We don't have to look far to find people struggling with poverty. And if you're not sure how to help, find a grassroots charity that is helping the poor and donate, maybe even volunteer. The book of Proverbs also commends hard work and diligence. For example, Proverbs 10 verse 4 says, diligent hands bring wealth, but a lazy person suffers poverty. Proverbs 12 verse 24, the diligent will rule, but the lazy will be slaves. Proverbs 14 verse 23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. And one more. Proverbs 21 verse 5. The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. So if you want to avoid poverty, we need to work. We need to work with our hands, not be lazy, but be diligent and hardworking, and we will reap the reward and keep away from poverty. So God has a lot to say in the book of Proverbs on this subject of money, hard work, diligence and generosity and stewardship, as we've just looked at. Another theme in this book of Proverbs is watching our speech. Actually, if you begin to count how many scriptures, how many verses in this book are on the subject of speech, it's really quite surprising. There's quite a lot. For example, Proverbs 10 verse 8. The wise in heart accept commands, but a chattering fool comes to ruin. Chapter 10 verse 11. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Verse 14. Wisdom is found on the lips of the discerning, but a rod is for the back of the one who has no sense. Verses 18 and 19. Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. Chapter 12 verse 18. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. Chapter 13 verse 3. Those who control their tongue will have a long life. Opening your mouth can ruin everything. Chapter 15 verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Don't we all know that one? Verse 28 of the same chapter. The heart of the godly thinks carefully before speaking. The mouth of the wicked overflows with evil words. Chapter 16 verse 11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Verse 24 of that chapter. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Chapter 17 verse 4. Wrongdoers eagerly listen to gossip. Liars pay close attention to slander. Verse 28 of that chapter. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. And one more. Chapter 20 verse 19. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. Wow, so many verses on the mouth. And that's not all of them, it's just a handful. Basically, the book of Proverbs teaches us that words can destroy and do others harm, or they can build up and bring healing. The tongue is a powerful tool, as the book of James in the New Testament talks about. It may be small, but it's very powerful. And so the book of Proverbs encourages us to use our mouths, our tongues wisely. You know, there are many more subjects we could look at in this book of Proverbs, but we don't have time for that today. But I just want to encourage us just to, as we read through the book of Proverbs, to not just read what is before us, but to apply these scriptures. Because if we don't apply what we read, as James says, it's just like looking in the mirror and then going away and forgetting what you've looked at. So don't do that. You know, these proverbs are meant to change our conduct, to improve our behavior as we live in the fear of God and take this moral and ethical teaching seriously. And it will improve our lives. It will lengthen our lives. Proverbs says that too. And it would also make this world a better place. That's for sure. I just want to leave you with one of my favorite Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. If you're in a place where you don't know the way forward, you need God's guidance, take these words to heart. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding. but in all your ways submit to God, and He will make your paths straight. Be blessed as you read through the book of Proverbs.